Well,
Thank you so much.
welcome to the Oso Spurs podcast. Didn't expect to be recording this title this evening. Daniel Levy has stepped down as Tottenham's chairman. But what does that change? What does that mean from what we know so far? And in all realms of possibility, what could change in those extreme circumstances? We're going to chat about it tonight with you in the comments. And to join me on that journey tonight, I'll start with our special guest in Nick, who you may recognise from the finance special pods if you enjoy those ones. But how are you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Jim. Like I said, it was a bit of a bolt from the blue this evening, and here we all are.
Yeah. Stu, how are you, mate? How are you receiving the news? Do you care?
I do. I would like to thank Daniel for all the work he's done and the position he's put the club. To be honest, it's hopefully it's a case of the king is dead, long live the king. But thank you for all your work, Daniel.
Deej, how about you? Are you feeling no love lost, or are you feeling thanks, but it's the right time?
I'm feeling, I haven't really kind of figured out how I'm feeling yet. It's kind of what I'm planning on using this podcast to do. But yeah, no, I think I'm feeling sort of in the middle. I'm very happy with the stature that the club has found itself in. But I do think that there were times where potentially, obviously, I think everything that's gone wrong with the club has been, I would say, probably misattributed to Levy at times. But there are some things that I would say, like you said before the podcast, he does have a bit of a reputation, and I do think that potentially it'll be exciting. I guess it'll be exciting, but I'm happy that we are where we are.
I do think, guys, it's going to be the moment that people realise we weren't standing up for Levy, but simply trying to explain Spurs' structure. When you say we still have the same owners, Levy did not own Tottenham Hotspur. He owns 29.99% of Tottenham, who own of ENIC, who own a majority share in Tottenham. The Lewis family, who own, it's around 70%, isn't it, of ENIC? Am I right? Yeah, something like that. Anyway,
70.1. They
are our majority owners. They are still very much in place. So Levy was never the guy with billion-dollar valuations and equity he could draw on to invest in the club, unless you feel he should have drawn in on his £2 million a year salary to fund some of Ben Davies' salary or something. So from that perspective, we're not suddenly going to get a new Daniel Levy under, Charrington's suddenly not going to come in and say, oh, that's it, I'm taking out a loan for £1 billion, we're winning the lot. They will still be operating under ENIC's tenure. But guys, do you think this means that ENIC has decided to take a different approach to the club, and therefore they feel a different type of chairman is the right one to take that forward?
I guess we won't know until we figure it out, right? That's why I was saying it's exciting. It's exciting. It's a little bit nerve-wracking because, as we've seen, it takes a lot of skill, I would say, to bring a club from where Tottenham were to where Tottenham are, with everything that you see how Villa is currently doing, where they're paying Luca Digne, I think more money than basically anybody at Tottenham at the moment. So it's definitely not an easy ask to do what we've done. But I'm interested, I guess, to see whether or not the overall, I guess, financial strategy changes, because like you said, I would say that the buck stops probably not with Daniel Levy, but with Joe Lewis and ENIC. And it'll be interesting to see if this is kind of representing a change in strategy, like you said, in a positive direction, or if it's more just internal restructuring for reasons that we just don't know.
Nick, with your finance lens on, what are you thinking about all this? Do you think it's signified? Gav called it, fair play to him, months ago. Yep. He said that, being a business journalist, all the things we were doing with that interview, with the language of it, with the tone of it, was setting up for almost like a succession to the step of changing Daniel Levy. So it was putting the foundations in place to continue a structure, not cause too much disruption. You know, Charrington got to get feel for the role, feel for what Daniel was doing, all that kind of thing before it happened. But it's also worth flagging the difference between a non-executive chairman and executive chairman. Well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so in fairness to Gav, a friend of the pod who's been on as well, I think I'm going to save his name down in my phone with a crystal ball emoji next to him, because I think he called this as far as early back as June, when we first heard some of those announcements, and Vinai was added as a CEO. I think, look, there's a couple of ways to look at it. I think if you just take the fan perspective for a moment, and my life as a Spurs fan is that I've fallen in love with loads of players over the years, and always, thought the best of Tottenham. But I suppose when I take a step back and think about Daniel Levy leaving Tottenham, he's been here like nearly a quarter of a century. That's a substantial part of my life. And I suppose when you think about it, he's almost become the dominant figure of Tottenham Hotspur over the last quarter of a century. And this is at a time when we've had some just incredible players, some brilliant managers, and yet he's the one that probably commands most of the airtime and most of the emotional energy of lots of Tottenham fans. So that, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it moves forward from there. I certainly think that if you think about, Joe Lewis has stepped back a few years ago, and Daniel Levy's coming up to retirement age now. He's nearly 65, so it makes sense in terms of the timing for him to do this. I don't think that's unusual. I also think as well, some of the sort of things I used to hear from people that worked in and around Tottenham was that Daniel Levy was absolutely desperate to win a trophy. And obviously last season we won a really, really big trophy. So there might well be a feeling of mission accomplished from Daniel himself. I think if we just turn in like to the finances, I'll give you my personal view in this. I just think that the way that mainly Levy and Enoch have transformed Tottenham over the past 25 years is quite remarkable. If we just put some context around that, when Enoch took over Tottenham in 2001, our turnover, or the revenue we made, was on par with Everton and Aston Villa, for example. We were miles behind Man United, Liverpool, and I know the world has changed a lot since then. So we've had two states effectively have come in and bought up clubs. I mean, you can count a third one with that as well. So the landscape has changed somewhat. But despite all of that, I mean, if you think about Everton, the fact that they've flirted with bankruptcy over that period of time, Villa have been relegated in that time. And what we've done is our revenue and what we deliver commercially has grown so substantially that we've overtaken Chelsea and Arsenal. The only way that Arsenal earn more revenue than what we do is through Champions League participation. We've had periods where we've not even had European qualification, where we've still been able to spend a lot of money on players. Those sorts of things didn't occur 10 years or so ago. And even if you were to go back as recently as 2014 and you look at our EBITDA in 2014 compared to the most recent financial years, I mean, it's gone up over 400%. So from a financial perspective, the footing that Levy has put the club on is quite remarkable. So he deserves a lot of credit for that from my perspective. Whether it now means that, as we've mentioned, it's a brave new world. There's lots of different owners out there and fresh ideas. Maybe that time has come, both from the Lewis Family Trust and those around Tottenham, that actually this is the right moment to start looking at slightly different way of doing things, some fresh ideas, and try and take Tottenham forward once again, like the journey they have been on the past 25 years.
What about you, Stu? You've always taken an approach that similar to me, I guess. He's done more good than bad for the club, but he certainly has his flaws in certain areas. How do you feel about it anyway?
Yeah, you're right. I've definitely always been more pro than anti, and I would be very surprised if the rumors about, that are going around now that the Lewis family got fed up of him and, they want to win all this. I don't believe all of a sudden they're going to, after 25 years, start throwing money into the club. I can't imagine it's going to be very much a change in the way we do business. Maybe it's just a more modern approach, new, fresh ideas with the new CEO and Vinai walking in. But it's kind of scary in a way, as Nick was saying. He's been there the whole time. It's that steady hand at the holding the tiller. It's the chairman that we knew while other clubs were struggling. We knew we would never have any financial issues. We'd never anything to worry about. And now it's a case of, what does the future hold? And it's kind of weird. But, again, as Nick said, I remember the dark days of the 90s when we were dreaming of playing Europa League, let alone Champions League. And we've made Europe 18 of the last 20 years, and the fan base is mad when we don't make Champions League anymore. I mean, the change in fortunes of the club over the last 20, 25 years is remarkable. And hopefully, now that he's gone and the vitriol can disappear and people can take away the anger and the bitterness and look at it a little bit less emotional and thank him for the position he's left the club. And hopefully this is the springboard to even more success, thanks to the infrastructure that he's put in place.
And just before I pass to Ben as well, you're already kind of seeing it swimming around in social media in the comments. It's already, we spent more last window because he was going, or we'll make something good will happen in 6 months and it'll be because he's gone, or something bad will happen, it'll be because he's left. And there's always that over fixation on, I think, him. And as there was still a hangover, I think, when we moved on from Ange, there's still people trying to get their point across as to whether it was the right or the wrong decision by kind of linking in irrelevant scenarios. I think we're going to see that chundering on for a long time. But I do want to just read out a few of the comments. And I do agree, right? And some of them about spending, as we said before at the start, and I'll pass to Ben in a second on this topic, actually, before I do that. But I just say, some people are saying it's a sad, hey, Stu as well, mate, saying you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Possibly. But that could swing both ways, right? I think if we're being truly objective, we might realize maybe we were too safe and steady, or we might realize, wow, we were in much better hands than we thought. Alison says, Daniel Levy has transformed the club's trajectory. I've sported for 30 plus years, so I remember who we were onwards and upwards, but I hope we don't end up with basically disingenuous owners. I would word that as. Although I think, Ben, we need to kind of reiterate here, right? It's still very much Enoch in charge. It's a change in chairman, not a change in ownership. So it doesn't suddenly mean we're going to see the floodgates of funds coming out. But you always did touch on it. We're all guessing here. No one's saying it's happening either. But there is a world in which this signifies part of bigger change, maybe, that could be a sign that moving Daniel Levy on to a non-executive chairman going in his place, who's more of a consultant to the Lewis family, could be keeping that post open for other reasons, maybe.
I think there's a lot of unknowns with it. Yeah, as you say, is it his decision? My assumption is it's his decision to step down, and he hasn't been moved on. Like Stu said, I'd be very surprised if at this point in their relationship, the Lewis family are suddenly, sick of the sight of him. But he's, I think he's probably just decided it's time, and he's maybe taken the club as far as he potentially could, or he's just reaching, what is he now, mid-60s? He gets abuse every week for turning up. Maybe he's just thinking he doesn't need the hassle anymore, and he'll sit back and watch as a fan. So yeah, I think there's so many unknowns. A lot of it's guesswork. As you say, it could be a prelude to him selling his shares, or to everybody selling their shares. Equally, you normally see these changes after a takeover. So part of me would be quite surprised if Vinai would come in on the basis that there could be a takeover in the next 6 months, year, and they might want their own person in charge. So you never know. And it could be, it might not be. My guess is there isn't an imminent sale, because he's just stepping aside, and maybe they've recognised that a fresh team and fresh ideas, like Nick said, were needed to take the club onto the next step. But I think there's no denying, the fact that we're in a much stronger position now than we were when he came over. Like the comments are saying, like people are saying, we all remember, or most of us remember the 90s, sadly. They weren't great, and we're now considered a big club. We're financially powerful. We spend money. We spend lots of money. So some people are saying, oh, but he'll make a lot of money. Yeah, he will. But it's his work really that has really brought the club up to a position that it's now worth a hell of a lot more than it was, as well as the Premier League gaining that popularity.
Well, I'm seeing that comment a lot, and I always see, but they didn't use their own money. But there's no owners that would go and build a new stadium typically with their own money. I can't, even if Joe Lewis said, I will pay for it, he'd have to get a massive loan. He's not going to have $1 billion in cash sat in his bank account.
Newcastle have got unlimited money. They're not building a stadium for their owners. They're not building a stadium for the club. So who does?
Exactly. It's I don't really get it. And the argument that he's in it to sell the club for profit. Same with, you either are in the 80% of the league who are buying a club to sell it for money or siphon money off somehow, or you're in the 20% of using it as an entity to promote the image of sports washing, effectively. Pick your evil. But there's no one in the league just chucking money in for a laugh just because they're having fun and they enjoy the football club doing well. When you see these chairmen celebrating, Marinakis is not a Nottingham. He's not born in Nottingham. He's not a Nottingham Forest boy. He's there to get Forest to a position where they're a bigger football club worth a lot more money and to grow his asset. That's why he's excited. He's not excited because finally, after all the years of playing with him in Football Manager, he's got the chance to do it in real life.
Surely you'd want to, though. I mean, you'd want your owner to want to make a return from the club because that means that they're invested in its success and its value. That's the way I've always looked at it, is that I would much rather have an owner that's motivated for those reasons than some of the other kind of bad actors that we've seen, not necessarily just in the Premier League, but if we look further afield at some of the teams lower down the divisions, I mean, there's some pretty sad stories down there, and they've not had the owners with the best interests. And as I said, I think the fact that we've had an owner that's motivated by increasing the value of Tottenham, and if they do receive a benefit from that, that's good because it shows they've got some skin in the game and it matters to them.
Someone just said, new chairman announced to me. And one of those trick images where you don't know what you're about to open, and I open it, it's a picture of Sol Campbell. Got me hook, line and sinker there. I do think it would be funny though, guys, if just to see I can just imagine the swash outside the stadium of the groups who really wanted Daniel Levy to go, all celebrating, beer bottles everywhere. And then there's like the podium outside the Skywalk, the new chairman's walking out, and it's Levy Jr. 25 more years of a new Daniel. Partially bald is beautiful will be the new saying on that. I didn't want to go through some of the questions. No, there's rumours of a statue. That's definitely a troll account, even though that was quite funny. I am intrigued to see what people make of Charrington as well, because, guys, he's a CEO, ex-CEO at Citibank. He's not a football guy. So, again, I think if people are expecting someone to come in, I don't know, Deidre, Stu, what you think? You're expecting him to come in and suddenly be able to have an eye for the next Luka Modric?
I mean, I don't think that from what I understand, at least from what Alistair Gold was reporting, it doesn't seem like he'll have much to do with the football side. It seems like he'll take what Levy's alleged role was, which was more of a role outside, like stepping back, I guess, from football and letting Vinai handle most of the I would say the day-to-day kind of football decisions and whatnot. So it kind of seems like that it's like almost like a partnership between the two. So I don't think that the new fella will be much of a difference. It'll basically be how Vinai chooses to run the club more than anything.
So all the other comments we had are in here. Do you guys, Nick and Ben, do you feel he grew the club's valuation beyond inflation, and Stu as well, or was it because a lot of people are saying, we bought the club for £24 million, it's now worth £3 billion, but much of that was the Premier League's inflation itself. Do you feel he's outgrown that through his business models as well, or is... I
think you just, Nick mentioned some of the clubs that were above us before and are now worth far less than us, and make far less money. So I think that argument falls down quite quickly, personally. I don't know what Nick thinks, but we've grown. Certainly, the Premier League growth helps massively. All clubs have grown in value as a result of that. Yeah, we all get swept up in that. But yeah, we've outgrown Everton, Villa, all these clubs that were above us before. We've caught up massively with some of the clubs that the real sort of big clubs from back in the day that we had Liverpool's and your Man United's. We're now a lot closer. So if it was purely that, all clubs would have grown by the same factor, if you like, or roughly the same factor, but they haven't. We've made up ground and overtaken quite a lot of clubs.
Mm.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry, Nick.
Agree entirely with Ben there. I mean, it's look, without a doubt, there's some of these owners that have taken over Premier League clubs have been in the right place at the right time, and I would definitely lump Enoch and Levy in with that. They've certainly had their share of good fortune. But I mean, what Ben said there is spot on. If you look at the turnover that the club makes in comparison to what it used to make and versus the rest of the league, I mean, it's head and shoulders above what virtually any other club can do. The different, I know that there will always be criticisms around, well, why haven't we got stadium naming rights? Because that's something else that could help us. Why is it that we're having to pay like between 25 and 30 million in interest on loans for the stadium, for example? And that's all fair for people to give those criticisms. But as I would say, I just think that if you take over a club, not to get too financy here, but if you look at the investment banking world with mergers and acquisitions, a lot of the time the value of a company is based on the goodwill, i.e. the customers that they have and the business that those customers will do. So if you're a big brand and a strong brand with a good presence, you're naturally going to be valued a lot higher than whatever your revenue and turnover is. I think that's true of Tottenham as well, because if you think that how we have grown globally, we've got some fantastic supporters clubs all around the world, big in America, big in South Korea, although, it helps with having Son with us for a substantial period of time. But those are more intangible things. And I think that people often forget that when they're considering the value of Tottenham, it's not just to take whatever our revenue is or turnover and times by 10 or 11 or whatever you want to do. It's that goodwill and how we've grown as a fan base. The fact that we have 42,000, 45,000, however many season ticket holders we have guaranteed to turn up every single week. The fact that it's so difficult to get an away ticket. So you will always have fans that follow us all around the country, follow us overseas. And not only that, but we've got fans in all countries of all corners of the globe. So from that perspective, I don't think it can really be argued just how big a brand. I know people hate hearing that, but how big a brand and how big a club Tottenham are now to what we were back in 2000, 2001.
I think as well, like everyone says, with the increase in the value of football's gone up, so it's easy, anyone could have done it. But not everyone has done what we've done. Not everyone has built the best training facilities in the country. Not everyone has built the best stadium in the country. And even the other argument is, well, we've only won 2 trophies in 20 odd years. But again, everyone neglects about our highest average league finish since the 60s. Everyone ignores the numerous semi-finals we've reached, the numerous finals. We've never, I don't think, had such a sustained success, even on the pitch, we were this close to this being the most successful era of our history, if a couple of finals had gone the right way. And I think in that case, people would be looking at this in completely different, angle. It's
going to be interesting to watch how other decisions are met in terms of reactions, because ticket increases in price are inevitable, and they were always pointed at Daniel Levy, right? I think the club's whole kind of methodology about trying to build up other revenues to increase its ability to operate sustainably, I can't see them suddenly knee-jerking out of that either. So it's going to be interesting to see if the business model very much remains the same, where the fingers are pointed, if anywhere, and what's asked, for people to, what they want to change. Because I think this will be a big realization that, every time a transfer doesn't go ahead, you can't now say, oh, classic, we did it. It didn't happen on the first day of the transfer window. It was Daniel Levy sticking his finger in. I think, though, when you kind of reflect on that, there is a positive, guys, to this change, which is whether he was right, whether it was right or wrong, I feel it got to a point where your relationship goes on for so long with someone that it gets harder for them to, there's just too many bridges burnt over time to make amends with some people. And some people have just had enough and they're just saying, look, I'm never going to be happy with you anymore. And that creates quite a fractious fan base because, you've got people they're just so, it's not, I have relatives who say the same thing. Like, it's not even him. They just want a fresh start. They just want something different. They've seen this model. They've seen it get so close. They appreciate the good. Even people are sympathetic. They appreciate the good, but they're just ready for, just ready for someone to come in and just go, I'm going to go gun ho and just try something different and just be excited by the idea of a bit of change. And I think that might help unite the fan base a bit. It might remove a few barriers between us all, which is a big positive. In the same way that, with Ange as a manager, I think I've never seen the fan base so split over a manager. Rumbling on to this season, people still kind of bringing up things about it. And same with Levy. At every corner of every debate, it had to be linked back to whether it was partly to do with him or not. So yeah, I think there's a positive there.
While I totally agree with that, every word of that, I do fear a little bit that it will just shift. While the ownership hasn't changed, it will just shift slightly over to a more generic ENIC is the problem, and ENIC are setting the targets and setting the restrictions and things like that, and they will sort of move away from Levy out and just really focus on ENIC out, which maybe they won't, but I fear the same groups will just shift focus slightly, still be complaining about the same issues, unless there's a huge sea change in how the club is run. As you said earlier, I can't really see that being the case.
Well, there's rumours just breaking now. Alan Nixon, I don't know how reliable his journalist, that the Lewis family are considering selling Tottenham. But we've been up for sale for ages, haven't we? Officially, publicly been up for sale. Allegedly, but I thought we were publicly up for sale. There was, isn't there? I don't know if anyone remembers. Didn't we? Wasn't it
we
public?
were looking for investment, weren't we, rather than for sale? Different.
Yeah. Okay. So a minority sale / investment we were looking at was this could be a majority. So, Johnny, Utah makes. Go on, sorry, Nick.
No, I agree. I actually think that the ownership have been really upfront for a long period of time, that they'd be very willing to listen to offers. Now, what those offers are, we've got no idea. I know that there's plenty in the rumour mill. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are parts of like ENIC or Levy himself that want to part with some of their shares. But I mean, again, that's a totally different conversation as to who comes in. I mean, I think whoever it is would have to be, they'd have to have a significant amount of personal wealth. So you'd be looking at one of the richest people in the world, or it would be some sort of, quite possibly an American sort of equity firm, or large company, as they've bought. I mean, I think half the Premier League clubs are owned by some sort of like American investment house. So it'll be very interesting to see what type of business it wants to buy Tottenham.
There's some interesting comments here about Paratici, which I want to bring up. Stu, you might have a view on this, because I know you've kind of always said, his time in Italy as you followed Serie A was not as prolific as it's perhaps made out to be sometimes our side of the pond. But they're saying that at Juventus, it was a similar setup. There was a part of the board which was almost acting like a firewall for Paratici, because for all his strengths, he does require a firewall to your business, because if you give him free rein, well, he ends up getting himself banned. And understandably, there's some concerns that unless someone keeps him quite close to them and keeps an eye on his activity, someone quite, by the book like Daniel, there's a bit of a... But I guess it's all conjecture, right? But I think it's just a fair comment to maybe just be aware of, because I always got the impression the reason he came back was he had a good relationship with Daniel Levy. Daniel Levy valued him, and he was brought in as an almost, right-hand consultant to advise on decisions. And he's only just come in. So it'd be interesting to see that.
Has he been officially confirmed as joining? I haven't seen any. Everyone just assumes he's joining, but I've not seen anything confirming he's back.
There was a Paul O'Keefe thing going around a couple of weeks ago that said it'll be made formal or made official after the window, but whether that was, I have not seen anything official come of that.
I mean, even if it does, it's up to Vinai to keep an eye on him. I've said for years that people over here, they think that Fabio is amazing just because he's on the phone. But the reason for the success of Juve was Marotta. And when he left, things went south with Juve. And, let's not forget Paratici is the genius who sold Romero to Atalanta. And Marotta went to Inter, and Inter's fortunes went north. So there was a direct correlation. It's very clear who was the genius behind the success there. And Fabio kind of lived off that reputation. And I really, I don't think he's that amazing. And I've always been skeptical of him coming back. And if he does, as I said, I hope someone keeps him in check. And he certainly shouldn't be allowed anywhere near the finance section of the company.
Well, he's got at least got a lot of wiggle room to play with in terms of FFP and PSR. But yeah, no, guys, here's a question. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to it, but I assume as Levy still owns his 29%, he's still going to be able to have a vote on a lot of decisions in the club, even if he's no longer our chairman, right? He's still going to be at the board meetings and having a say.
You get a
quite
vote,
major,
but more around big changes, like changing the name of the entity and changing, the way it's structured, maybe changing board members, things like that. You don't really get a say on, they don't vote or get a say on day-to-day things, really. It's more Charrington there now as chairman is there to sort of represent the shareholders and basically be that bridge between the two in terms of what the shareholders want in results and then what the day-to-day man in Vinai does. So while you're right, he still has a decent share of the club, he still has a vote in terms of how the club broadly is run. It wouldn't be anything that would sort of feed into the real day-to-day decisions. That would still be Vinai.
Okay. Well, do we want to finish with a bit of a summary of each of something that we feel Levy left as a positive impact and maybe something that might be opening the door for an opportunity for someone to improve on an area? Do that, Deej?
Sure.
What
why not?
change-wise? Like, are you get gone?
I think obviously getting the stadium and the alternative revenue streams that I think he so often gets made fun of for, I think is just so important in terms of being able to build a consistent platform to build off of into the future. He has the obviously the new stadium. I know that the new stadium's a game changer was kind of a joke for a while. We're kind of seeing the fruits of that now, right? Where we're able to bring in, we're able to both bring in extra revenue streams with concerts and whatnot, and we're also able to, I think, kind of start flexing our financial muscle a little bit more. Obviously, we still, I would say, spent sort of within our means this window, but based on the rumors surrounding Savinho, for example, that we were still pushing for that until the end of the window. It seems like we had the ability to go through that for the right player. So I think that you're kind of seeing that. So I think that was definitely the best thing. But I think that I would say that we just weren't, I think, getting one step below the top and then kind of not adding that extra piece of quality or whatever, I think is probably going to be, I don't want to say what keeps him up at night, but because I think overall, I would say as a chairman, he had a very successful tenure despite the unfortunate lack of trophies. But I do think that there were periods of time where we could have added that one extra player to potentially push us past that semifinal, losing in the final stage and actually winning something. So I'd say that would, I don't know how much of that is up to him, but.
Well, Kieran McGrath's got some interesting stats. Levy was in his 25 years, we were deemed the most profitable club of that era. But it's a bit misleading, actually, taking his entire tenure and comparing it against a mismatch of others. And I need to check the form of profitability he's used there as well. But only 5 clubs in 25 years have been deemed to have a profitable tenure under an owner. And we are one of them. But yeah, I think we'll do a finance pod. If you are interested, subscribe to get that. I think we'll go over a bit of a summary on some of this stuff, because some of it is, when you compare them to some of the others, I think it really depends which metrics you want to take here. But there's certainly big topics on the wages, big topics on the transfer spend and other bits. But Nick, do you think has he done more good than bad in your eyes? And as a summary, and anything that you think, particularly sets us up well that he's done, and something that maybe a new person could take as an opportunity as a positive now he's gone to make their, an easy win for them based on what, he perhaps wasn't strong at.
I'll give it some balance, Jim, because there are some things that I just don't think of that he's done very well. So, for example, the one thing I will always be a blot on his copybook for me will be the way he pretty much sacked Martin Yeo at half time, and the management of that I thought was terrible. It's not something I'd want to see my club doing. But then, if you want to look at the positive, I think just, as we've mentioned, where we've come from to where we are now, I think is hard to argue against. I would certainly say, obviously the stadium is going to be his greatest achievement as a chairman. But I think some of the things that they've set up around that. Specifically the fact that they've secured such fantastic commercial terms on loans for the stadium. That's a huge help to us, not just today, but over the next 20, 25 years as well. So that shouldn't be forgotten. The way that they've considered and really used that stadium to try and squeeze as much commercial opportunity out of it as possible. So you look at the fact that we can do a series of events. They've really diversified income in a way that no other club has ever been able to or could possibly do either. So, again, fair play there. What I would like to see in the future, I think from a financial perspective, we're really sound, and we've got a fantastic platform from which to operate on. What I would want personally, because I'm a fan of this club and I'm a season ticket holder and I go to all the home games, lots of away games, is I want the club to talk to us fans far better than we've been spoken to in the past. I don't know how many years. It feels like we've been kept at arm's length. I'd like a lot more engagement. I'd like far better comms. And that would make me feel, I think, a lot better about the club I support.
And well said, Nick. I think I agree with everything you've said there. I did want to quickly touch on Sean's comment, guys, as a collective, before I move to Stu and Ben on your thoughts. But Sean said, "Is this a Lewis family push? Is Levy the fall guy for Eze and Morgan gives White in the window?" I don't think you'd lose a job over that. I feel Gav had it right. It was being teed up a while ago, and in reflection, there's probably been a bit of a handover period going on the last 6 months since we won that trophy, or however many months it was, and it felt like the right time for a new era, and Vinai coming in and diluting his responsibilities were a signal towards that. Shout out, I have to say as well, Lee McQueen. I was on a pod with him. He got pelters when he said this was going to happen, because it didn't happen straight away, but it did end up happening. So maybe retract some of those pelters if you sent them his way. But Stu, go on, mate.
Yeah, I was going to say also, I don't think it would have been kind of a putsch. I think that the Levy and Lewis families are so intertwined. His son is co-CEO, I think, of Tavistock. So there's still the kind of the business relationship there. Now the other thing I would say, I agree with what Nick said before. The other thing is I'm glad that Daniel is a Spurs fan, and I'm glad he's gone out having finally got that trophy that he's been after for so long.
Yeah, I think whatever you want to say about him, he's one of the few chairmans, home and away, he is there every single game, whatever competition, Europe as well, he is there watching every single game. And if you're purely in it for a business transaction, I don't think you would bother to that extent, personally. But there you go. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I think the guys covered it nicely. Like, he set us up in such we're in such a strong position now. We can really harness this to new people, whether it's new owners, whether it's Vinai. There's so much to work with. We're really in a strong financial position. If we can keep getting into the Champions League, we can go out now and spend 150, 200 million every summer without even worrying about sales. So we're in a really good position. There's a lot to work with. The revenue streams will keep on rolling in. So there's so much to praise. I think that, and I agree. I've never agreed with the idea that he doesn't care. Why would you turn up and take that abuse week after week and watch every game if you don't care? I just don't see it making sense. So I think there's a hell of a lot to praise, but on the sort of things that might change, I agree with there's been some PR blunders. There's been some, there's not been great communications, and I do think he maybe did reach the point where he's an excellent businessman. He's an excellent accountant. He got us in this really strong position, built a great stadium, financed it well. But did he reach his limits on the football side? Probably on his expertise in terms of how we then use those extra resources to really compete with the top tier of clubs. And I think maybe afterwards had 5 years in the new stadium, spent a lot of money, gone through Mourinho, gone through Conte. I do think that was the point where they sort of realised this isn't working. We're spending more money now and we're not really catching up. We're getting worse. So I think they realised that it wasn't quite working. Maybe they just needed some fresh ideas. So going forward, that's what I'd look forward to seeing is how Vinai sort of subtly changes the decisions and the approaches, and hopefully how that sort of kicks us onto the next level.
Yeah, I think like you can say as well, like he got a lot of the managerial decisions right in the run up to the stadium, and a lot of them wrong. Ironically, once he built his stadium, that was supposed to be a foundation for a manager to succeed in. Martin Jol was a brilliant appointment. Harry Redknapp was an excellent appointment. Pochettino was an excellent appointment. Ramos was not, but we did get a trophy over the line with him. There were a lot of good appointments along the way, and we were building then in a world in which the only way we could financially compete with the stadium and the infrastructure we had and the money we were coming in was to sell a star player and buy 5 more and make sure you got a star out of one of those lot and do all those kind of things. And we managed to get to a point where we solidified ourselves in European spots. We went from a club hoping to qualify for the Europa League through the, what was it called? The Fair Play League, for getting the least yellow cards over a course of a season or something like that. Those things, and to actually qualifying for it and reaching the final. But then I think after the he made some terrible. He made a big mistake to remove a proper recruitment structure under Pochettino, and the squad stagnated, and we didn't get ahead when we had a big run up to the new stadium. We didn't get ahead of the inevitable, cash flow challenges we were going to have and OPEX challenges we were going to have, and then he got those managers preceding Poch, shot for the stars. I appreciate that with big names, but we all reflect on that. We lost identity of our attacking football and our DNA as a club and all those things as well for a long period. And I think we're still paying the price for those poor recruitment windows for 5 or 6 years, even though the spending went up. We got the talent ID so wrong for so long. It left the squad in a very difficult spot. But last 3 or 4 years, everything seems to be building back up in the right direction again, and got the trophy. And I think he deserved that moment, and I hope he is able to come back to Spurs. He will be. He's still got 30% of the company of Spurs, pretty much. But so of course he will. He'll have his own box probably. But I hope when he's seen in and around the ground, he's met with a handshake rather than a barrel of abuse, because I think he's probably done a lot more good than bad for this club, and his intentions were probably mostly in the right place for everything he tried to do. That's my view on it anyway.
Agreed.
Anyway, guys, we'll probably do a finance pod when the dust has settled on this and speak out exactly what it means. And we've got an episode coming out tomorrow. I've just been finishing editing, which is all about why Spurs really struggle against teams like Bournemouth and don't look particularly convinced against Burnley, but can wallop Man City and look really good at PSG. Deej knows all about this as well. But done a little piece on that because it's really important to understand that piece, I think, because it makes a lot more sense when people like Deej and JJ explain it to you. I'm like, oh, yeah, that is why, isn't it? Yeah, it actually makes more sense now. And then go into games and I have a very different expectation to it. But anyway, up the Spurs, guys, and roll on Don Charrington, I guess, for now.
Come on, you
Can't
Spurs.
can't get used
Come
to
on,
that
Spurs.
picture. Come on, you Spurs. I didn't end the stream again. I completely forgot. But yeah,